Do you believe that courage can transform lives? Get ready for a moving story that will touch your emotions. Imagine an elderly man returning to college and being humiliated by the young students simply because of his age. What these young people could never have predicted is that this man would become an example of overcoming adversity and inclusion that would forever change the university community. João has always been a curious man, passionate about history since he was young. At 72 years old, he finally decided it was time to fulfill his dream of graduating from the university. A widower for a few years and with his children already grown and independent, he realized he had plenty of time and willpower to dedicate himself to his studies. With a smile on his face and his heart full of hope, he enrolled in the history program. On the first day of class, João felt like a boy again. He woke up early, put on his best clothes, and caught the bus to the university. When he arrived, he was enchanted by the lively campus, young people running back and forth, and the typical buzz of the academic environment. He felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement that he hadn't experienced in a long time. As he entered the classroom, João noticed that all eyes quickly turned to him. Some students whispered to each other, while others watched him with curiosity. He tried not to care, but it was impossible not to notice the whispers and giggles. "Who's that old man?" he heard someone murmur, which made his heart sink a little. João chose a seat in the back of the classroom, trying to feel less exposed. He sat down and took out his notebook, ready to start taking notes. "Good morning, everyone. My name is João, and I'm very excited to learn with you," he said, trying to break the ice. Some students responded politely, but most continued to ignore him. The professor entered the classroom and began the lesson, speaking about the importance of history and how it shapes our present and future. João was captivated, taking notes enthusiastically on every word. However, he couldn't help but notice that some students looked at him with disdain, as if he didn't belong there. "What does that old man think he's going to learn here?" he heard a young person whisper to a classmate. During the break, João tried to approach some of his classmates. "Hi, everyone, can I join you?" he asked with a gentle smile. "Of course, Mr. João, have a seat here," responded a young woman named Anna, trying to be friendly. But most of the students moved away, preferring to continue their conversations without including him. Despite the looks and comments, João refused to be discouraged. He knew he was there for a greater purpose, to fulfill his dream and prove that it's never too late to learn. "I won't let the ignorance of others stop me," he thought to himself. He had faced greater challenges in life and was determined to overcome this one as well. The class continued, and João asked several questions, demonstrating his interest and knowledge on the subject. The professor, surprised by his enthusiasm, patiently answered all of them. "I see we have a dedicated student here," she commented, casting an encouraging look at João. He smiled, feeling a little more confident. At the end of the day, João left the university with his head held high, despite the challenges he faced. He knew the path would not be easy, but he was determined to move forward. "Each step is a victory," he said to himself as he walked towards the bus stop. "I'll show them that age is no barrier to knowledge." When he arrived home, João was greeted with enthusiasm by his children and grandchildren, who were eager to know how his first day went. "So, Dad, how was it?" asked his daughter Maria. "It was a day full of emotions," João replied, smiling. "But I'm more determined than ever to continue." That night, before going to sleep, João reflected on the day's events. He knew he would face many challenges ahead, but he also knew he had the support of his family and the determination needed to overcome them. "Tomorrow is a new day," he thought. "And I'm ready for it." With this certainty, João closed his eyes and fell asleep, dreaming of the future he was building. João was excited for another day of class. He arrived early, as always, and settled into his usual spot at the back of the room. Today's lesson was on the French Revolution, a subject he loved. With his notebook ready and pen in hand, he was eager to absorb every detail. The professor, a middle-aged man with an arrogant demeanor, began to speak. João listened attentively to every word, but there was a question he couldn't get out of his head. He timidly raised his hand, and when the professor called on him, he asked his question. "Professor, how did the Enlightenment movement directly influence the French Revolution?" The professor paused for a moment, looked at João with disdain, and let out a sarcastic laugh. "Oh, Mr. João, history is not that simple. Perhaps this is a bit too complicated for someone of your age." The classroom erupted in laughter, and João felt his face burning with shame. He lowered his head, trying to hide from the mocking glares. "But professor, I just wanted to understand better." João tried to explain, but the professor interrupted him. "If you can't keep up with the class, perhaps you should reconsider being here. We don't want anyone disrupting the rhythm of the other students." The laughter increased, and João felt a lump in his throat, holding back tears. "I'm trying to learn, like everyone else," João said, trying to remain calm. "I just asked a question." The professor shook his head impatiently. "Maybe you should ask more age-appropriate questions, Mr. João. Now, if you don't mind, we need to continue with the lesson." João remained silent, feeling humiliated. He looked around and saw the young faces full of scorn. He tried to focus on the lesson again, but the professor's words echoed in his mind. He had never felt so out of place and disrespected. The desire to be there, which had been so strong before, began to waver. The class continued, but João could barely pay attention. Every laugh, every whisper from the students felt like a knife in his heart. When the professor asked another question to the class, João decided he would no longer remain silent. He raised his hand again, but the professor ignored him, calling on another student to answer. At the end of the class, as everyone started to leave, João approached the professor. "Professor, I just wanted to learn. It's not fair to treat me this way." The professor shrugged. "Life's not fair, Mr. João. If you can't handle it, maybe you should stay home. Now, please, I need to prepare for the next class." João left the room feeling defeated. The humiliation weighed heavily on his shoulders. He walked down the corridor, trying to avoid the glances of the other students. Some were still laughing and whispering about what had happened. João knew he needed a moment to himself, to think about what he would do next. When he got home, João sat down in the kitchen chair, his head in his hands. "Why is this happening to me?" he thought. He knew that age should not be a barrier to knowledge, but he was starting to doubt whether he could continue. That's when his daughter, Maria, walked into the kitchen and noticed something was wrong. "Dad, what happened?" asked Maria, concerned. João took a deep breath and told her everything, from the humiliation in class to the professor's harsh words. Maria listened attentively, her eyes filled with tears. "That's not right, Dad. You have every right to be there. We'll find a solution together." João felt warmth in his chest as he heard his daughter's words. He knew he was not alone in this fight. "Thank you, Maria. I will keep going. I won't let them knock me down." With renewed determination, João decided he would face any obstacle that came his way. And so, he prepared for the next day, stronger and more determined than ever. João was deeply shaken after the humiliation in class. He spent the weekend reflecting on what had happened, feeling a mixture of sadness and outrage. Is this really it? Am I going to let them take my dream away? He thought, as he looked at the books he loved so much. He knew giving up was not an option, but the pain was overwhelming. On Sunday afternoon, he gathered his family in the living room. I need to talk to you all, said João, his voice trembling. His children and grandchildren drew closer, sensing the seriousness of the situation. I was thinking of quitting the university, he confessed, with tears in his eyes. But that doesn't seem fair. Not after everything. Dad, you can't let those ignorant people bring you down, said Maria, holding his hand firmly. You've always taught us to fight for our dreams. It wouldn't be any different now. His grandchildren agreed, murmuring words of support. João felt a wave of courage wash over his heart. He still had so much to give and learn. You're right, responded João, wiping away his tears. I can't let this end like this. I'm going to fight for my right to study. With the support of his family, he began to think about how he could face the situation. But how? He asked himself. That's when his son, Pedro, had an idea. Dad, what if you sought legal help, suggested Pedro. Maybe a lawyer can guide you on what to do. João considered the idea. He had never thought about taking legal action, but this seemed like a viable option. I'll find someone who can help me, he decided, feeling his determination growing. On Monday, João contacted a family-known lawyer. Dr. Carlos, I need your help, João explained, detailing the entire situation. The lawyer listened attentively and agreed that this was a clear case of discrimination. We'll explore your legal options, João. You have every right to be in that university. In addition to speaking with the lawyer, João decided to seek support from a human rights NGO. Hello, is this the Voices of Equality NGO? He asked on the phone. Yes, how can we help you? A friendly voice answered on the other end of the line. João explained his case, and the NGO offered to provide support and guidance. That week, João had a meeting with the NGO team. João, what happened to you is unacceptable. We're going to help you fight for justice, said Mariana, one of the NGO's lawyers. We'll start with a formal complaint to the university and, if necessary, we'll take the case forward. João felt relieved, knowing he was not alone in this battle. With the support of the lawyer and the NGO, João began to feel more confident. I'm going to face this head-on, he said to himself. He knew the fight would not be easy, but he was prepared for anything. I won't let anyone take away my right to learn, he promised, feeling the weight of the responsibility. The following week, João returned to the university, determined to continue his studies. He knew the looks and whispers would continue, but now he was prepared to confront them. Good morning, everyone, he said as he entered the classroom, with a smile on his face. Some students still laughed, but João didn't care. His determination was greater. The professor noticed João's presence and tried to ignore him, but João didn't let it go. Professor, I'd like to talk to you after class, he said firmly. The professor, surprised, nodded his head. João knew this was just the beginning of his fight, but he was ready for any challenge. With his family, the lawyer, and the NGO by his side, João felt strong. He knew he was fighting not only for himself, but for all those who had been wronged. Ignorance will not win, he thought, walking through the university corridors. And with this determination, João pressed on, ready to face any battle that came his way. João was determined to carry his fight forward. With the help of the lawyer, he filed a lawsuit against the university for discrimination. Dr. Carlos, how will we proceed? Asked João, anxious. First, we'll gather all the necessary evidence and testimonies. Then, we'll present the case to the court, the lawyer explained, confidently. The news of the lawsuit quickly spread throughout the university. Some students sided with João, while others continued to mock him. "You're brave, João," said Anna, a law student. "We need more people like you." João thanked her for the support, feeling less alone in this battle. Soon, João's story began to attract the attention of the local media. "We're with you, João. Your fight is fair," said some messages of support he received. A reporter from a local newspaper contacted him. "João, we would like to tell your story. This could help combat prejudice," the reporter suggested. João accepted the proposal and gave an emotional interview. "I just want to study and be treated with respect, like any other student," he said, his eyes shining with determination. The article was published and quickly gained prominence. 60-year-old man sues university for discrimination, the headline read. The impact was enormous. The national media began to cover João's case, and he found himself at the center of a discussion about age discrimination. "João, how do you feel being a symbol of resistance?" asked a reporter from a major TV channel. "I feel I'm doing what's right. Everyone deserves a chance to study, regardless of age," he responded, firmly. With the increased attention also came challenges. Some thought João was exaggerating. "You just want attention," yelled a student as João walked down the corridor. But he was not shaken. "I'm here for a greater purpose," he thought, ignoring the negative comments. He knew his fight was just. Community support grew even more. Human rights groups, other NGOs, and even celebrities began to speak out in support of João. "You are an inspiration," said a message from a famous actress. João never imagined his story would have such an impact. He felt the responsibility increasing, but also the strength to continue. Meanwhile, the legal process was progressing. "We have a solid case," said Dr. Carlos, reviewing the documents. "We are confident in winning." João felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. He knew this was a crucial moment. "We're going to do it," he repeated to himself, like a mantra. The university began to feel the pressure of the media and the public. "We are re-evaluating our policies," declared a spokesperson. But João knew that words were not enough. "We need concrete actions," he said in another interview. "I'm not fighting just for myself, but for all who have been discriminated against." Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. João entered the courtroom with his head held high, alongside Dr. Carlos. "Mr. João, we're with you," shouted some supporters outside. João felt a wave of emotion. He knew this was a big step on his journey for justice. During the trial, the lawyer presented all the evidence of discrimination. João gave his testimony, recounting in detail everything he had gone through. "I just want to be treated with dignity," he said, with a firm voice. The judge listened attentively, and João felt that justice was on his side. As he left the courthouse, João was surrounded by journalists and supporters. "What's the next step, João?" they asked. "Keep fighting, always," he answered, with a confident smile. He knew the battle was not over yet, but he was more determined than ever to win. And with the support of everyone, he knew it was possible. João never imagined his fight would gain so much repercussion. Suddenly, it seemed like everyone was talking about age discrimination in academic and professional environments. "Did you see João's interview on TV yesterday?" asked a student in the university corridor. "Yes, he has so much courage," another responded, admired. The discussion spread through social media, newspapers, and television programs. "It's outrageous that this type of discrimination still exists," said a commentator on a morning show. "We need to value the experience of the elderly," the host agreed. João watched it all with a mixture of pride and concern. He knew the exposure had its two sides. While many supported him, João also began to face hostility. "You're delaying our class with this story," complained a student during a lecture. "This is a university, not a nursing home," mocked another. João took a deep breath, trying not to be shaken. He knew he was there for a greater purpose. At home, his family continued to be his greatest support. "Dad, you're doing something very important," said Maria, his daughter, as they had breakfast. "Don't let those comments get you down." João smiled, feeling strengthened. "I know, my daughter. I just want justice to be served," he replied. Support also came from unexpected places. "João, you are an example to all of us," said an older professor, meeting him in the corridor. "Keep fighting firmly in your struggle." João was moved and grateful. It was comforting to know he was not alone. He felt the solidarity growing around him. But the hostility persisted. Some professors began to treat him with indifference. "You're causing a lot of problems, João," said one of them, coldly. "I just want to study in peace," João responded, trying to remain calm. He knew he needed to be strong. The fight was just beginning. The public debate continued to grow. "We need to rethink our attitudes towards the elderly," said a sociologist in a TV debate. "Their experience is valuable." João watched these programs, feeling a pang of hope. Perhaps his story could really change something. At the university, some students organized a support group for João. "Let's start a petition against discrimination," suggested Ana, the law student. "Great idea," agreed Pedro, another student. João was moved to see the mobilization. "Thank you, everyone. This means a lot to me," he said. Meanwhile, the media continued to cover his story. "João, how do you feel about all this attention?" asked a reporter during a live interview. "I feel we are giving voice to an important cause," João replied. "This fight is not just mine. It's for everyone who has been wronged." The messages of support kept coming. "You are an inspiration, João," said a letter from a 70-year-old woman. "It's never too late to fight for our rights." João read each message with care, feeling more strengthened every day. He knew he was on the right path. Despite the hostility of some, João remained firm. "I won't let them bring me down," he thought as he entered another class. He knew the battle was long, but he was prepared. With the support of his family, friends, and the many people who believed in his cause, João felt he could face any challenge. And so, he pressed on, determined to make a difference. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. João sat next to his lawyer, Dr. Carlos, feeling a mixture of nervousness and determination. "It's going to be all right, João. We're well prepared," said Carlos, trying to calm him. João nodded, taking a deep breath. He knew this was a crucial moment. The judge entered the room and everyone fell silent. "Let's start with Mr. João's testimony," announced the judge. João stood up and walked to the witness stand. "Please, tell us what happened," the judge asked. João began to speak, his voice firm but laden with emotion. "All I wanted was to study, but I was treated with disrespect and prejudice." As João spoke, the entire room seemed to be gripped by his every word. He described the hurtful comments, the jokes, and the looks of contempt he had faced. "This is not right," he concluded, his eyes welling up. No one should be treated this way because of their age. The university's lawyer squirmed in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. After João, other elderly people gave their testimonies. I went through the same thing, said Dona Maria, a 70-year-old woman, her voice trembling. I was ignored and humiliated. Another gentleman, Mr. Antonio, told a similar story. They treat us as if we were incapable, he said, with indignation. Each testimony further reinforced João's case. When it was the university's turn to defend itself, their lawyer tried to justify the institution's actions. The university has strict policies to maintain the quality of education, he said. This is not about discrimination. But his words sounded hollow. The audience in the courtroom murmured in disapproval. João felt that the truth was on his side. The university's defense called some professors to testify. We never intended to discriminate, said one of them, visibly uncomfortable. Our concern was always about academic performance. But João knew those were just excuses. This is absurd, he murmured to Carlos. The lawyer nodded in agreement. During the lunch break, João was approached by some journalists. João, how are you feeling so far? Asked a reporter. I feel we are managing to show the truth, he responded. I hope justice will be served. The cameras captured every moment. João knew his case was inspiring many people. In the afternoon, the trial continued with more testimonies. Dr. Carlos presented evidence of emails and messages that proved the prejudice. These proofs are irrefutable, he told the judge. The university failed to protect its older students. The judge seemed to agree, analyzing the documents attentively. João felt a wave of hope. The university's defense was running out of arguments. We will adjourn for the day, declared the judge. We will resume tomorrow with the closing arguments. João left the courthouse feeling exhausted, but also relieved. You were amazing today, said Carlos, giving him a pat on the back. Thank you, doctor, João replied, smiling. Without you, I wouldn't have made it this far. The next day, the courtroom was even more crowded. Today is the big day, João said to himself as he prepared. The closing arguments were made, and João felt his team had presented a strong case. Justice needs to be served, said Dr. Carlos in his final statement. The judge seemed thoughtful, weighing each argument. Finally, the moment of the decision arrived. After considering all the evidence and testimonies, this court concludes that there was discrimination on the part of the university, declared the judge. João could hardly believe it. He felt tears of relief streaming down his face. We won, he exclaimed, hugging Carlos. The courtroom erupted in applause. As he left the courthouse, João was surrounded by journalists and supporters. João, what do you have to say? Asked a reporter. Today is a historic day, he responded, emotional. This victory is not just mine, but of all those who fight against prejudice. He knew his struggle had made a difference, and that from then on, nothing would be the same. The courtroom was silent as everyone waited for the decision. João held his daughter Maria's hand, trying to contain his anxiety. It's going to be all right, Dad, she whispered, giving him an encouraging smile. The judge finally lifted his head and began to speak. After reviewing all the evidence and testimonies, this court rules in favor of Mr. João. The room erupted in murmurs and applause. João felt a wave of relief and emotion. We won, Maria, he exclaimed, hugging his daughter. I knew justice would prevail, said Dr. Carlos, with a triumphant smile. João thanked the lawyer, feeling a deep gratitude for all the support he had received during that difficult period. The university was found guilty of discrimination and had to pay João compensation, as well as implement policies to prevent future cases of prejudice. "This is a landmark," said Carlos. "It's going to change a lot going forward." João felt that his voice had finally been heard and that his struggle had not been in vain. He was deeply moved. Meanwhile, the young students started to reflect on their attitudes. "Have you seen the trial's outcome?" asked Anna, a law student. "Yes, and it made me think about how we treat the elderly," replied Pedro, a classmate. "I guess we've never really stopped to think about that." The conversations were changing, and João's case was at the center of them. On social media, the debate was raging. "We need to respect our older colleagues more," posted a student on Twitter. "They have so much to teach us." Many shared their own experiences and reflections, showing support for João and condemning prejudice. João followed all of this, feeling hopeful about the changes that were to come. Even the professors began to rethink their attitudes. "I always thought I was being fair, but maybe I need to reevaluate my behavior," admitted one professor during a meeting. "We need to create a more inclusive environment for everyone," agreed another. The university was transforming, and João saw this as a great achievement. João was invited to give lectures and share his experience. "It's an honor to be here with you," he said, in front of a room full of attentive students. "I hope my story inspires positive change." The students listened intently, many of them clearly touched by what they heard. João felt that his effort had been worthwhile. The media continued to cover the case, bringing new perspectives and stories. "João, you have become a symbol of resistance," said a reporter during an interview. "How do you feel about that?" João smiled humbly. "I feel I did what was right. And if that inspires other people to fight against injustice, then it was worth it." On campus, the change was visible. "Hey, João, you're an inspiration to all of us," said a young man, as he crossed paths with João in the hallway. "Thank you, my friend," João replied, with a smile. He noticed that he was now treated with much more respect and consideration. The victory in court had been a turning point, not just for him, but for everyone. João also reflected on everything that had happened. "I never imagined my struggle would take on this magnitude," he said, talking to Maria at home. "I'm so proud of you, Dad," she responded, her eyes shining with admiration. "You made a difference." João knew there was still a lot to be done, but felt he had taken an important step. The university now committed to creating a more inclusive environment. "We will implement training on diversity and inclusion," announced the chancellor. João was invited to participate in the committee that would design these changes. "I'm happy to help," he said, accepting the invitation. He knew this was an opportunity to ensure that no one else would go through what he had experienced. The university auditorium was packed. João was invited to a special assembly, not knowing exactly what to expect. "Dad, are you okay?" asked Maria, holding his hand. "I am, just a little nervous," João replied. Suddenly, the chancellor stepped onto the stage and took the microphone. "We have something very important to share with you today," he began. The students who had humiliated João stepped onto the stage, visibly embarrassed. "We want to apologize," said one of them, his voice trembling. "We were terribly wrong, and we're here to acknowledge that." João was surprised. "Wow, I didn't expect this," he murmured to Maria. "We are deeply remorseful for our behavior," continued another student. "João, you have been an inspiration to all of us," said Pedro, one of the group's leaders. "Your example has shown us how wrong we were." João felt a mix of emotions, but mostly relief. "I thank you all for being here today," said João, standing up. "I accept your apologies, and I hope we can learn and grow together." After the apology, the students proposed an exciting project. "We want to create an inclusion program for elderly students," announced Ana, with a hopeful smile. João was intrigued. "And we would really like you to be our partner in this, João," added Pedro. João smiled, feeling a new wave of hope. "Of course, I'm in," he responded. The preparations for the program began shortly after. "We'll need ideas to make the campus more inclusive," said Pedro, during a meeting with João and other students. "We can start with lectures and workshops on diversity," suggested Ana. João was excited by the enthusiasm of the young people. "And maybe create a shared space for all ages," he added. With João's involvement, the program quickly gained momentum. "It's amazing to see how everyone is coming together for this cause," commented Maria, proud of her father. João felt he was making a difference in an even greater way. "This is just the beginning," he said, determined. "We have a lot of work ahead, but I'm excited." The official launch of the program was a grand event. "Welcome to our new inclusion project," announced the Chancellor, in front of an audience filled with students, professors, and staff. João was called to the stage to speak. "I never imagined I would come this far," he said, emotional. "But I'm happy to be here, contributing to a better future." The first workshops were a success. "It was amazing to hear everyone's experiences," said Ana, after one of the sessions. "I learned so much about empathy and respect." João was impressed by the engagement of the young people. "You are really embracing this cause," he commented. "This fills me with hope." The barriers between generations were falling. The shared space, dubbed the Friendship Café, became a popular gathering spot. "Here, everyone feels welcome," said Pedro, showing the place to João. "It's exactly what I dreamed of," João responded, smiling. The walls were decorated with photos of students of all ages, celebrating diversity and unity. Over time, the university transformed into an example of inclusion. "Other institutions are approaching us to replicate the program," said the Chancellor, proudly. João felt that his effort was worthwhile. "We are creating a legacy," he said during a meeting. "A legacy of respect and solidarity." Everyone agreed enthusiastically. João's journey had been long and full of challenges, but he finally felt he had found his place. "Dad, you did it," said Maria, hugging him. "Not just for you, but for all of us." João smiled, his eyes watering. "It was a tough fight, but it was worth it," he replied. "Together, we are building a better future." The implementation of the inclusion program began with great enthusiasm. "Let's do this right from the start," said Pedro, excited, as he organized the first events. João was by his side, helping with the preparations. "Every detail matters," added João, checking the list of speakers. The atmosphere on campus was more welcoming than ever. The first activities of the program were a success. "João's lecture on history was incredible," commented Ana, impressed. "He has so much wisdom to share." João smiled, grateful. "I'm glad you enjoyed it," he responded. "I hope this inspires you to value all generations." The response from the students was extremely positive. The university began to see real changes. "It's amazing how the campus is more united," said the Chancellor in a meeting. The inclusion program really made a difference. João felt an enormous sense of satisfaction seeing the results. "I never thought I would see something like this," he commented to Maria. It's a victory for all of us. The barriers between generations were dissolving. The months passed quickly, and finally the day of João's graduation arrived. "I can't believe this day has come," he said, adjusting his robe. Maria was by his side, proud. "You deserve it, Dad," she said, emotional. João's younger colleagues were also there, ready to celebrate. "Let's make this day unforgettable," said Pedro, smiling. The graduation ceremony was a moment of pure emotion. "Congratulations, João," shouted the students as he stepped onto the stage to receive his diploma. João felt a wave of pride and fulfillment. "Thank you all," he said, his eyes watering. "This diploma is a victory against prejudice and in favor of unity." Applauded standing, he felt the affection of everyone around him. After the ceremony, there was a party to celebrate. "Let's celebrate this achievement together," said Ana, raising a toast. João savored every moment, surrounded by friends and family. "I never imagined I would be here, celebrating with you," he said, emotional. "But here we are, and this is just the beginning." The young people toasted to overcoming and friendship. As the party continued, João reflected on his journey. "It was a long and difficult path," he said to Maria, in a quieter moment. "But every obstacle was worth it." Maria agreed, holding her father's hand. "You are an example of perseverance for all of us," she said, proudly. João knew his story would inspire many others to never give up. The professors were also emotional about João's graduation. "You have taught us so much more than we can teach in the classroom," said one of them. "Your presence here has changed this university." João thanked them humbly. "It was an exchange of learning," he responded. "I learned as much from you as you did from me." The exchange of experiences was transforming everyone. Before leaving, João made a final visit to the Friendship Café. "This place represents everything we fought for," he said, looking around. Pedro and Ana were there, enjoying the welcoming environment. "And we will continue to fight," said Pedro, determined. "Inclusion is an ongoing journey." João agreed, feeling part of something much greater. On the way home, João reflected on the importance of never giving up on dreams. "Age is just a number," he thought, looking out the car window. "What matters is the determination and the will to make a difference." Maria, at the wheel, noticed her father's smile. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" she asked. "Just how life can be surprising," João replied. Thinking about the future, João felt a renewed energy to continue contributing. "My journey doesn't end here," he said to himself. "There is still so much to be done." With the graduation, he proved that dreams are possible at any age. "Let's move forward, always," he thought, determined. Overcoming prejudice was just the beginning of a new chapter.